All right, so let's talk about the Chinese dynasties, the East Asian empires. The Qin and the Han dynasty are noteworthy for their religious toleration, their technological advancements, and their governmental system. And their governmental system is very notable because it lasted for over 2,000 years. So, after the chaos of the Warring States period, which was 500 BCE to 220 BCE, the Qin dynasty arose in East Asia. The Chinese believed that the heavens would provide them with a ruler who would establish a family line or a dynasty that would rule until its leaders displeased the powers in heaven. And this was called the Mandate of Heaven. Like Confucianism, it was an integral part of the Chinese culture for centuries. And Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, that's how you say that, Shi Huangdi, returned to China to dynastic rule with both diplomatic skill and military ruthlessness. Emperor Shi Huangdi used a Chinese political philosophy called legalism, and this established a clear chain of command and even clearer rules of bureaucratic etiquette. It included severe punishment for those who purposely or even accidentally broke those rules. This dynasty didn't last very long, but it created a solid foundation for dynastic rule in China, and that endured into almost the early 20th century. Other empires around the globe during the classical era had large organized governmental bureaucracies like the Roman Empire, but none matched the complexity of those established by the dynasties in China. The Han Dynasty lasted much longer than the Qin Dynasty. The Han Dynasty existed about the same time as the Roman Empire and exchanged trade and diplomatic ties with them along the Silk Roads. The empire was roughly as large as Rome's, at least as wealthy, and certainly more technologically developed. Its capital was called Chang'an. Like all classical empires, the Han Dynasty extended its power through a mix of diplomacy, trade, and military power. The Han began building a Great Wall of China, which was a project that continued on and off for over 1,000 years. The Great Wall was built to keep northern invaders out of the empire. And the Han also began canal digging projects that linked northern and southern China. And these include they were designed to help trade. They allowed grain from the north to be transported to the south, rice from the south to be brought to the north. The canals also helped the movement of many people. The Chinese government moved many people from northern areas into the south largely to promote unification of a common culture. And here's a map of the East Asian empires. Here's your Han Dynasty. You can see it's much bigger than the Qin Dynasty actually was. And the emperor, I'm sorry I didn't write this down, but the emperor name that you need to be familiar with for the Han Dynasty is Wu, W-U-D-I, Wu Di. And he's the one that was kind of ahead of building these roads and canals. All right, let's briefly talk about the South Asian empires. The Mauryan Empire and the Gupta Empire are the two South Asian empires that existed in present-day India. Following the invasions of the Aryans, India developed by the 6th century BCE into small regional kingdoms that often fought each other, and there were periods of centralized rule, but the subcontinent remained decentralized throughout most of its early history. In the 320s BCE, Chandragupta Maurya made his move to fill the power vacuum that was left after Alexander of Macedonia withdrew from the region, and we'll talk more about him. Maurya successfully dominated the area and set up a bureaucratic administrative system to rule the empire, and his grandson was Ashoka, and he continued his father's conquering ways until the bloody campaign was over. This bloodbath convinced Ashoka to stop using a conquering approach and instead rule by moral example. And he used his rock edicts, which were announcements carved into cliffs and caves, to get his message out to people. And during his reign, he set up a tightly organized bureaucracy. They collected taxes. They were made up of officials, accountants, and soldiers. He built roads, hospitals, rest houses. And after his death, the Mauryan Empire declined and India returned to a land of large regional kingdoms. But order and stability was maintained with an increase in trade. It was not until 320 CE that India would be again united. Chandragupta was no relation to the other, and he established the Gupta Empire and conquered many of these regional kingdoms. The south, however, remained out of his control, and instead of setting up an organized bureaucracy, they left the local government and administrative in power. Under the Gupta, Hinduism emerged as the primary religion of the Indian culture, while Buddhism mostly disappeared from the Indian subcontinent, which was really well, I'm sure Ashoka, if he would have been alive, would have been very upset with that because he tried very hard to implement Buddhism as the religion in the South Asian empires. Like Greece, India developed into a patriarchal society with a strict social structure. Women were forbidden from reading the sacred prayers or the Vedas, and under Hindu law, they were legally minors and subject to the supervision of their fathers, husbands, sons, etc. And in order to marry well, a woman's family needed a large dowry. Women were not allowed to inherit property, and a widow was not allowed to marry. And the social structure became dominated by the power of the Brahmins. Oh, I'm sorry. And the caste system. And caste is something that can't be changed. It determines your job, your diet, your marriage, etc., etc. And these restrictions were enforced by the ruling class. And the Brahmins became very powerful under the rule of the Guptas, and caste distinctions grew more prominent. But during this period, India's culture thrived, including advancements in the arts, math, and science. Like I said, the Mauryan Empire, Ashoka became a devout Buddhist around 260 after the Battle of Kalinga, and he changed the way he ruled his empire. He rewarded Buddhists with land, encouraged the spread of the religion, and he even sent out missionaries. But Hinduism still eclipsed Buddhism. Math and science flourished in areas of geometry and algebra. The circumference of the earth and the value of pi were calculated in the Gupta Empire, and the concept of zero, the decimal system, and the number system that we still use today, called Arabic numbers, were developed under the Guptas.